If you grew up in the 1980s or early 1990s, you know that the biggest part of baseball card collecting was always collecting rookie cards. And the funny thing is that that's not just a thing of the past. The fascination with rookies continues to this day. Baseball card companies have worked really hard to capitalize on the collecting phenomenon, and it seems that the hype will never end. You know, it's kind of a funny thing when you think about it. I mean, there's no real reason why a rookie card should be more hyped than any other card, right? So where did this phenomenon come from and why? Actually, the answer to that question is kind of obvious. The most famous baseball card during the boom years of the 1980s and the early 90s was this one, the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. Everybody wanted to own one of these. The irony, of course, is that Topps didn't print Mickey's rookie card. In other words, a 52 Topps Mantle is not a Mantle rookie. Mantle was featured in the 1951 Bowman set. But scarcity and the Topps brand has a funny way of playing with customer perception. Now, the other funny thing about the rookie card phenomenon is that really nobody cared about rookie cards for years. I mean, years. Those of you who remember collecting in the 1960s or even in the 1950s know that the star status of players was a lot more important back then than whether it was their first card. If you go back to the real early days of baseball card journalism, you won't see rookie cards mentioned at all. For example, this 1961 article from a local North Carolina newspaper mentions the T206 Honus Wagner, but it makes no mention of rookie card collecting or even the 1952 Topps Mantle. Card collecting back then was seen as similar to stamp collecting or coin collecting. This was an innocent hobby, but not one with much long-term investment potential. And even articles that talked about investing, such as this 1964 article from a small-town newspaper in Minnesota, said nothing about rookie card speculation. Jefferson Burdick, pictured here in a 1955 article from the Syracuse Herald-Journal, was more intent on collecting complete sets than on speculating in the first card issued for any specific player. Well, like I said, there's no intrinsic reason for rookie cards to be worth more money or to be worth anything. There's no intrinsic value attached to them. In fact, many of those first-year cards for players really aren't that attractive because they were sharing them with other players. So why do we care so much about them today? Well, scarcity is one issue. Remember that famous 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle? Well, that was printed as part of the last series, a good percentage of which famously ended up in the ocean. Though the Mantle is more common than the other high series 1952 Topps cards, his popularity as a player has driven up his price substantially. As early as 1980, baseball card shops put out advertisements offering to pay top dollar for 1952 Mickey Mantle cards. And this is where the speculative market really started to take off. Widely read newspapers like the Philadelphia Inquirer reported that the Mantle was worth money to collectors, and so people started scrounging through their attics to see if they didn't have a copy. But perhaps the true beginning of the hype train was this 1979 Wall Street Journal article. This is the first serious article I've been able to find about treating baseball cards as an investment. And yes, this article mentions several rookie cards in particular, including the 1952 Mantle. Yeah, as you guys know, you can't really tell the story of rookie cards or of baseball cards in general without talking about the rise of the bubble. And the baseball card bubble really came out of nowhere and ended up sweeping up all of society into it. I mean, if you're a young collector, like if you're younger than me, if you're younger than your 40s, you have no idea what things were like back in the 1980s. Baseball card ads go back to the 1950s, actually. This, for example, is from a November 1969 issue of The Sporting News. Now, as early as 1975, The Sporting News had to devote a full page to the various sellers. This is because the hobby started to mature. And if you've got an eagle eye, you'll spot an ad for the 1975 TCMA set. But it really wasn't until after that Wall Street Journal article that the major news companies started adding fuel to the hype train. Well, it doesn't take an economic genius to see the old Dutch tulips in these articles. So we do know about this boom and we know all about the ensuing junk wax era, but why rookie cards of all things? Why did those take off? Well, it just so happens that relatively old and obscure rookie cards like this famous 1963 Topps Pete Rose rookie started to take off in price in the early 1980s. As Pete Rose approached Ty Cobb's lifetime base hit record, speculation for his rookie card started going out of control. The craze led to this card. This is the first widely sold counterfeit baseball card that we know of. This card started to spread in 1982 and led to an FBI investigation. Thanks to a ridiculous court ruling, the counterfeit rose cards are actually still in circulation, although they have this counterfeit stamp on the back. And believe it or not, even the counterfeits have value. So this particular one sold on an open auction for $20 back in 2022. The big stars of the 1980s all saw their rookie cards skyrocket in price. The Nolan Ryan rookie card, for example, shot up like a rocket in the early 1980s and has never come back down since. The Paul Molitor rookie card is another example, and note that he shares it with Alan Trammell, another 1980s star. This card was mostly overlooked until the 1980s hype train got going. And of course, we can't talk about heavily hyped rookie cards without mentioning the famous 1975 Topps George Brett, which is one of the more iconic cards that the hobby has ever seen. Now, you'll notice that each of these players were stars when the bubble took off. And then there were also the big rookies of the early 1980s as well. This 1981 Fleer Fernando Valenzuela card, for example, took off like a rocket as part of the craze. At the time, collectors preferred it to the 1981 Topps Dodgers Future Stars card. It turns out that rookie card collectors preferred going with companies that gave a player his own card. Now, Topps tried to correct this oversight by giving Fernando his own card in the 1981 Topps Traded set, but this was too little too late. To this date, the traded card is not worth as much as the Fleer card. Okay, now the fault here really goes to Topps. So not only was Topps reeling from the sudden end of the monopoly era, which came in 1981, but it turns out that its carding policies also really started to hurt the company. Okay, a little bit of history for you first. Topps Traded started off in the mid-1970s as a small end-of-the-season series attached to the original set. The idea was to update players who had changed teams during the season. By 1981, the traded set was separate from the official set and was only available as a box set through certain baseball card stores. That's right, these cards never made it into wax packs. You had to buy them from the card stores. Because the cards were not sold through traditional packs and distribution methods, collectors didn't see them as real cards. Yeah, this is gatekeeping, I know, and really today not that many people care that much about it. But the pattern was established. Throughout the 1980s, Topps constantly held major rookie cards back from its official set. Topps decided instead that it was going to push out the sure thing rookies in the traded set at the end of the season. It was kind of cheating because Topps could wait to see how the players would play for the first half or so of the season before deciding whether to give them a card. And in the case of one very famous major superstar, this policy really hurt Topps. This man, Jose Canseco, burst onto the baseball scene in 1985 like nobody else. Canseco was big, fast, and had a lot of power, and played really well as a September call-up in 1985.
Will have to hustle, can't get the ball out of his glove.
In fact, if you look at Canseco's 1985 stats, you'll see that he had star written all over him. Canseco managed to hit a hair over 300 in under 30 games. He hit an incredible 5 home runs in just 100 plate appearances. He was only 21 years old. Okay, if you were going to take a bet, like bet your company on a star player, Canseco is the man that you would bet on. But the funny thing is that Topps decided not to do that, and I really don't fully understand why. This card used to be the most famous modern card in baseball card collecting. I remember seeing it on the cover of multiple magazines and books back when I was a kid. The 1986 Donruss Canseco is iconic. Now, Fleer also printed a Canseco card, but it forced Jose to share it with Eric Plunk. The Fleer card never really took off as a result. Sportflix, a brand new company, gave Canseco a card together with Mike Greenwell. Even the specialty sets featured Canseco, such as this hideously ugly 1986 Fleer League Leaders set. And then there was also Donruss Highlights. But you know, Topps wasn't part of that game, and like I said, the reason why is kind of unclear. Topps decided to give Darren Daulton a rookie card in 1986, for example. Daulton had hit only .204 in 103 at-bats in September 1985. And you know, it's not like Topps didn't have enough room in its set. It printed no fewer than 9 Pete Rose cards in 1986, which in my opinion is kind of overkill. Okay, the truth is that Topps did print a Canseco card in 1986, but that was only in its traded set, and baseball card collectors really didn't like this. Well, the problem, you see, is that 1986 traded sets cost more per card than cards distributed in normal wax packs. And this was before you got to the markups that every baseball card store put on its merchandise. And so, even to this day, the 1986 Topps traded Jose Canseco is treated as just another junk wax card. It never achieved anywhere close to the iconic status that the Donruss card had. And even after the steroid talk and all the scandals, that iconic Donruss card will still set you back quite a bit of money, especially in top condition. Well, you know, the reason why I've decided to talk about this is because this kind of decision making has really had a resonance in the hobby over the years. I mean, today rookie cards are still valued more than anything else, and they're really treated as something special, including by companies that don't want to go down the road that Topps went. For years after this, companies competed with each other to be the first one to come out with the first card of players that had a chance to be a star. You know, sometimes they guessed right. And, of course, sometimes they guessed way wrong. But it was Upper Deck's decision to print this card as card number 1 just a few years later that proved to be one of the biggest marketing wins in the entire history of the hobby. Well, in future videos, we'll talk more about the history of Upper Deck. We'll talk more about how it burst onto the scene. And as strange as it is to value rookie cards above all else, the truth is that the companies that did jump on this bandwagon and started producing cards of players long before they were even sure to be stars have been richly rewarded in the end by the industry. Now, as far as Topps is concerned, I really do think that it learned the lesson from this Canseco fiasco, but it still boggles my mind that Topps managed to drop the ball on this one.